It's to a castle I will take you, where what's to be, they say, will be.
My boyfriend works with bricks. I'm unsure of the English word. And his crew went to a castle in our town to renovate some of the brick walls. He loves history, so for him, this was like a dream gig. He and one of his co-workers went down to the basement that's otherwise off limits to the public to do some renovating there as well. I'm assuming they replace old, broken bricks with new ones. It's basically a long hallway with a bunch of rooms, each with a door. It was built 500 years ago. While they were doing their work, all of the doors suddenly slammed, with only a few seconds in between them. He says that no human could have possibly ran that fast and there were no footsteps. They both freaked out and hurried out of the basement, up to the rest of the crew who looked at them cluelessly. Well, we were both taking a stroll around 7 PM the other night, and him being the history freak, he wanted to walk through the castle. You can walk through the gates, there's a short path which then leads out to a huge garden. I was very reluctant, having experienced weird, unexplained knocks on the ceiling in my aunt's house the weekend before that. He dragged me along anyway and told me historical facts about the castle and so on. Nothing really happened while we were walking through the gate and on the path, but when we got out to the garden, I felt even more scared than before. There's water around the castle, but in the middle of the water there's a small little square of green land. My boyfriend explained that one of the kings would put his wife on that land whenever she got upset, and wouldn't bring her back until she had cooled off. I kind of snorted at that, looked at the land and then glanced up at the castle again. In the window, aligning with the square piece of land, stood a completely white figure. There wasn't anyone in any of the windows before, which is probably why my view shifted to that specific window. I'm almost certain it was a woman, since her figure had a thin waist. I freaked out and yanked my boyfriend away, who first laughed at me, but then he glanced back himself and saw the same thing I did. I didn't tell him which window I had looked at, or even what I saw. He turned back to me, said, "Okay, I saw her," and then we both hurried through the garden and out onto the street. He said her. I'm not sure if it's the queen that he was talking about earlier, or just some other spirit. I wonder if maybe she was watching him, rather than me, considering his past experience in the basement. Also the fact that she appeared in the window, lowest to the ground. For anyone wondering, the castle I'm referring to is Frederiksborg Castle. I tried googling around about ghosts, but little to nothing came up.
I used to work in what is now considered a golf course in New York that has a restaurant-type setting in what used to be a residence back in the mid to late 1800s. It was created here in 1852. The building is said to contain the stone from Whitby Abbey, a 13th century Northshire, England ruin. It was private until 1921, when it became part of the country club. Now this was a seasonal job in a professional kitchen as a salad dessert girl. I worked in the food industry for 11 years, but it was never this high-end. The exterior is a gorgeous sight to behold. If you were into structure and especially history, the moment I laid my eyes on it, I had taken my phone out and looked up the history. I get giddy doing this. I even did that to my first apartment. I like to learn new things. Eerie 1. So this place looks like a mini castle. Mind you, it was a personal residence at one point that had 3 floors. Offices were on the top. Occasions and events were held on the second, and there was a basement, where maintenance, workers changed, needed condiments and spare dishes. The basement, it It gave off an eerie feeling, not at first. I wasn't paying attention to it at first, but as I got comfortable, the more relaxed I became, the more I felt it. About a month in is when it started. You walk into the basement through the hidden stairs that tucked into the side, hidden from the view of the customers. The moment you touch the cold stone floor, you feel eyes just watching you, and it was always coming from the opening on the side room where the boiler was. It never passed the walkway. You couldn't see it, but you could feel it watching you come and go, like a child on timeout in a corner and waiting for their parents to tell them that they can move again. I had to go to the basement to get my chef's smock in order to work. This was about 6 years ago, so I was old enough to know that there was someone there, but also to know that ghosts were taboo or unbelieved by the majority of civilization, so I kept this to myself, like a sad but dirty secret. One day, I was in the bathroom, and a fellow chef came in. She was changing, and I heard her excuse herself if I were to see anything I shouldn't, but she was unable to change downstairs because she felt someone was watching her from that room, that specific boiler room. My head jerked back a bit hearing her, and once I stepped out of the stall when I was done, I turned to stare at her to make sure she was being serious. She was. She said the exact thing I felt. Someone was in the boiler room, silently watching us. I admit it, I too had gotten the feeling when I was in the basement, but I thought it was just me. It only confirmed that it wasn't, and I wasn't losing my mind. As I was washing my hands while she changed, I kept my head low to prevent any accidental glimpses. Though I explained to her, it kinda made sense if you know the history of the place. She only told me what she knew, which everyone knew. The bricks were from an actual castle. With that, I confirmed, according to my research, that yes, they were from a castle from England. The castle was found in ruins, so the creator decided, why let the bricks go to waste, I guess. I wanted to say something, but my tongue was fighting my teeth to come out and say it, so I did. I explained that because of what might have happened within the walls of the castle when it was in its peak. One can only imagine what hell had been placed during those horrid times of kingdom reigns, tortures of prisoners, etc. Whatever part of the castle they took, they might have brought a friend with them in the process, or only God knows what was buried here before they built their residence. But if that was the case, wouldn't it have been free to roam instead of being confined to one room? All I know is that we tried our best to avoid the basement, if necessary.
This is another story about the castle I worked in as a salad chef. As stated before, it was built in 1852. The building is said to contain stones from Whitby Abbey, a 13th century North Yorkshire, England ruin. Now, in the first story I wrote my constant experience with the basement, but this one I'm about to share is about a room. Now, there is an area above the basement that is allowed for customers. That's the bathroom. When you get to that first floor, there are 3 doors on that floor. Men's to the left, women's straight ahead, and to the right is what they made into a dressing/changing room for the main guests for events they host. Now, I don't pay much attention to any room except where it needs to be. I didn't get any eerie feeling from any other room as I did in the basement. So it wasn't like the attention was needed from anywhere else. One day, I walked downstairs to the bathroom. I walked past the changing room and something caught my eye and a feeling came upon me. The room door was open, and when you walked past the door, you could see what looked like a 2 or 3 seated sofa next to a small bed table for the lamp. A bit deeper in was a make-up table with a mirror and a chair in front of it. I always see myself in that mirror when I walk by it, when the door is left open. But that day, the glimpse of an old woman sitting in the chair staring at herself in the mirror, her hands resting on the surface. I caught the white of her hair as it was up in a bun, She wore a dress that seemed a bit old, but it was long. The face I couldn't see. It was faceless and her head was slightly hung, but she was in the room with the light off. Mind you, this was a quick 5-second catch of the eye. A 5-second catch that made me stop at the bathroom door. Hands on the doorknob, asking myself, WTF did I just see? No customers were allowed in till a certain time, and no worker fitted that description I caught of her. I stared at the door and slowly let go of the bathroom knob so I could walk towards it. Because of course, you walk towards things that you know shouldn't be there. I would probably be the first idiot to die in a horror movie. I stand in front of the door. The only other way out, and this time, the mirror is completely free. No one was in front of it but me. The chair was free and sitting under the respective table. No old woman. I read a bit more into the castle's residences after that. Her appearance seemed to be from the castle's origins in England, so it had to be the residence of the castle after it was built. Turns out that room was the owner's mother, or mother-in-law's bedroom. It was her favorite room. I have always enjoyed the paranormal for entertainment, but kept with me a healthy dose of skepticism when it came to real-life stories. Growing up, my mother was very much into the supernatural or anything paranormal. Psychic, ghosts, the afterlife, you name it. This instilled in me from a very young age a skeptical outlook on things of this nature. Instead, I would learn how psychic and paranormal experts fake evidence or cold read, and things of this nature to basically debunk my mum. Although I always was entertained by her stories on some level. She would always tell me stories about how my supposed gift to communicate with ghosts from a young age, and how my family members refused to babysit me because I creeped them out too much. I also have a lot of memories of being young and strange, unexplainable and downright creepy things happening to me all the time. But I would cope with it by justifying how there must be some logical explanation, such as sleepwalking or just my overactive child's imagination or something. There is one experience though that always stuck with me. I witnessed as an adult. I wouldn't say it changed my mind, but there is something about this I cannot let go of or rationalize away. I even get emotional and start to tear up a little when I think about it today, which is unlike me. I am now 28 years old, but when I was 21 I worked at a 4-star hotel spa named Airth Castle in Scotland, located just outside of Stirling, where many of the bloody and violent wars Scotland is historically known for took place. This is a real place, and already has a reputation for being haunted. Feel free to Google it if you like. I wanted to tell you my experiences of working in this hotel, and the strange events I experienced while working there. To give context, the hotel is made up of 2 main buildings. The first is a new building, a typical hotel where the guests stay with luxury dining and spa, etc. The other building is the castle itself, which is mainly only used for weddings, and one time, Sean Penn stayed with us while filming a movie. That was pretty cool. I worked as a kitchen porter. My job was to wash dishes, clean up, basically all the kitchen duties which didn't involve cooking, to allow the chef to focus on preparing the food. Whenever there was a wedding which needed to be catered for, some of us would be sent up to the castle to work there. Eventually I refused to work in the castle. Of course, the staff there knew about the castle's reputation and would tell each other stories about what they had heard. In my skeptical mind, I simply rationalized it as local entertainment and just got on with my work. One of the most frequent occurrences that would be reported is that whenever guests would stay in the castle, they would phone the front desk in the main building and tell us that they could hear children playing and running around. and ask if we could send someone up to deal with the children. There were never any children in the building. The castle was always reserved for the bride and groom to have their place to themselves. I cannot stress how common this complaint was. Almost everyone who stayed in the castle reported the same story of being disturbed by the sounds of children playing in the hallways. Sometimes, late at night, I could hear the sounds of running coming from the upstairs balcony in the central room of the castle. If I was ever brave enough to go investigate, it would stop. The basement floor of the castle has been turned into a few guest rooms and storage space for the staff to use. It looked like any other floor of a hotel, not the creepy basement of a castle you would expect. There are reports that this floor is haunted by a groundskeeper, and also I have a few stories about people telling me about a phantom dog they could hear barking. I never encountered either of these spirits, but the reason I am mentioning it is that the basement floor of this castle especially terrified me. Every time I was there, I felt the most uncomfortable feeling. Like when people tell you they feel like someone is watching them or something. That entire floor gave me the most uneasy feeling, as if I could feel someone breathing down my neck, or I was surrounded by something. I was never able to go down there without feeling stiff and having the most horrible feeling of dread come over me. It's hard to put into words. I hated going down there. If you stand outside the castle facing it, there's a dining room just to the left of the entrance on the ground floor. In this room, there is an enormous painting of a woman. I forget who she is, a wife of the commander or something who lived there. The painting was also especially creepy. She had such a stern look on her face, which, I guess, was common for that era and style. Very regal looking. There were a lot of unexplained noises that came from the area this painting is located, like knocking and banging, etc. One time a group of us were standing in that room, commenting on how depressing the painting looked, only to be interrupted by a slow, scratching noise that went all the way from the top to the bottom of the 10-foot-high wall the painting was hanging on. Old castles like this do not have hollow walls. Not like a loose piece of stone could have been falling inside the hollow wall or anything, which was my first thought. We could not figure out where this noise came from. My most frightening moment inside that castle happened one night during a wedding. The chefs had finished with their jobs and had taken everything back down to the main building. I was left in the kitchen to finish washing up and cleaning. The guests had left and the bride and groom were, well, it's not my business what they were up to. The only other people in the castle were a few remaining waiting staff, also finishing tidying up. I went out the side door to the castle to have a cigarette. Let me take a second to describe the layout of the kitchen for you. The southwest corner of the kitchen was the entrance to the kitchen. The southeast corner was the washing up area where I was working. The northeast corner was a passageway to a small room where we kept plates, cutlery, and a walk-in fridge. When I came back into the kitchen after finishing my cigarette, I could hear someone working in the back room, moving cutlery around and stacking plates. Normal sounds of someone else working, so I paid no attention to it and got back to washing dishes. After a few minutes, I heard the working sounds from the other room stop, and the room fell silent for a while. Sounded like no one was moving, which I thought was strange. Another piece of information that you need to know is that me and one of the girls I worked with at the time would play this game where we would try to creep up on each other and scare the other person. When the sounds of the working stopped and there was an unusual silence, I figured, this is that girl. She's trying to scare me. My plan was to continue working like normal. Then, when she jumped out to try to scare me, I would just be cool as a cucumber and be like, nice try, haha. I waited for a full minute. She never jumped out. I waited for a second minute. Still nothing. Thinking she was just really committed to this joke, I went to investigate. I walked into this room and nobody was there. I cannot describe how hard my heart jumped when I walked into the room to find nobody there. I started questioning my own sanity and freaking out. I definitely heard someone working back there for a good 30 to 60 seconds before it stopped. The workstations the chefs used formed kind of an alley you had to walk through to get out of the kitchen. Nobody could have left the kitchen without walking directly by me washing the dishes, and since I was on high alert, I definitely would have noticed someone leaving. The incident really freaked me out. I had to leave the building for a while and really didn't want to go back in to finish my shift. Another time I was working in the same kitchen and the night security guy came through looking confused and told me to follow him. This security guy also had more than his fair share of creepy stories while walking around this building at night. But we will get back to that in a minute. He took me through to a room at the back which had a small bar and was used to entertain the wedding guests sometimes. This room was not in use that night. He asked me to tell him if I could smell anything. Upon stepping into this room, I immediately was hit with an overwhelming smell of cigar smoke. He insisted nobody had been using this room, and the guests left a while ago. Apparently, this room was previously used as the aforementioned commander's study, where he would draw up battle plans and spend time alone. Since I was normally working quite late, I knew this night security guy pretty well. We talked about all the creepy stuff we had both encountered in the castle, and he was insistent that it was not just stories. He began telling me all of his stories and just how common they occurred. After all, he was the guy who had to go check the castle out every time a guest complained about children running around. He told me his encounters were so frequent and unignorable. He had begun to do deep research into the history of the castle and its previous inhabitants. Apparently, there were 2 children who had died in a fire there once, the children of the woman in the painting in the dining room. Their nanny had run back into the building to try and save them, and was also killed by the fire. The night security guy told me he had personally taken a photograph of the castle, and in one of the upstairs rooms, slightly left of the entrance, you could clearly see a nanny with 2 children standing in front of her looking out the window at him. Although shaken from other strange experiences a little, my rational, skeptical mind was still there. He was a tall, slim man in his 40s, spent a lot of time alone, walking around the castle, investigating disturbances constantly. I figured he might have been exaggerating or making it up for a good ghost story. But the next day he brought in the photo to show me. In the upstairs window, just like he said, was 2 children and their nanny looking directly out the window, clear as day. I don't know if that man still works there or not, but he owns a picture that will give you the creeps. He doesn't seem to have put it online. I looked. If anyone from Airth Castle reads this, and a man matching that description still works there as a night security guard, tell him I am looking for this picture. Once he showed me this photo, that was the last time I was ever in that castle. Every time a wedding was happening, I would refuse to go caterer for it. I'm not going, send someone else. Eventually I was fired from that job because me and the manager would frequently fall out over this. But I honestly don't care. I never wanted to go near that place again. Despite keeping my skepticism, I admit there was something about that place that just wasn't right. I will remember that job and that castle until the day I die. Just thinking about being back in that building gives me the creeps. One last thing. If you did decide to Google this castle, you may see that there was a national news story about the castle where someone snapped a photo during one of the weddings and captured an eerie green ghost shape in the picture. This photo was taken in the room we smelled the cigar smoke in. Although this is an old news story, I didn't read about it or see this picture until today. This is what triggered me to share these stories. I hope you enjoyed them.
So, I know what you're thinking. If you're from Northeast Ohio, you've definitely heard about Squires Castle in Willoughby. And like many other places in Willoughby, Squires is said to be haunted. Now, my whole life I've said that this is bogus. In fact, that the ghost stories I've heard of it felt practically impossible. It's said that at night, through the windows, you can see the lantern light of the owner's wife who died there. This can't be true, as she didn't die there. But, I don't know. Whatever, I guess. But everything I believed about this place changed when some friends and I went ghost hunting the other night. We went in, so excited. We'd planned to walk up to the castle, look through and maybe even explore the hiking trails after all late at night. So I'll split up all the occurrences that happened on our trip into different paragraphs. Hopefully this is easy to follow. It was drizzling. Not very much. No big storm or anything at that time. We were out there. At about midnight, driving towards Squires, maybe about a mile away, the three of us in the car saw a bright light in the sky, somewhat above where the castle was. One of us initially thought it was lightning, but it definitely wasn't. It was bright, produced no sound, and lasted a couple of seconds. It happened twice, lighting up a circle of clouds and a white bluish-purple light. We didn't think too much about it at this time, but now feel it should be included into the story. Then, around 12:05, we pulled into Squires Castle. From the road, before even pulling into the parking spot, we could see it, the lantern. There was an orange glow coming from inside the castle, and it was moving. Initially, I thought it was a house behind the castle, but then remembered nothing was behind the castle except trees. It couldn't have been my headlights, as they weren't pointing that way and we weren't moving. One of my friends thought it was just some teens exploring the castle like we planned to, but as we pulled into the parking spaces, we saw that there was no other cars and the lights had gone away. After gathering enough courage, we left the car and started towards the castle. I was recording on a handheld camera. One friend was recording on his phone, and my other friend was recording audio on her phone. We walked all the way up until we could see the castle. I personally didn't see much, but my friend saw quite a bit. Watching his phone, my friend said things like, "I saw something flash by my camera," or "There's something moving around inside." My other friend felt a little gross. If you ever had the right type of encounter, you'll know what she means. She also said she saw something moving inside. She was looking with just her eyes, no camera. My friend said she really wanted to go into the building, but my other friend and I wanted to get out of there, me especially. So we turned back towards the car and walked back. On the way back, we were still exploring and thinking we could see things on the other side of the path, but we weren't sure. Then my friend, half-jokingly, said, "I low-key want to go back up into the castle." Shortly after she said this, boom! A heavy stomp could be heard next to my friend. "Nope," he yelled and ran. Then the two of us ran. He said he heard the stomp and could feel the presence of something big right next to him. We got into the car and drove off so fast. All of us were in shock. I was holding back tears. I didn't know what to feel. I had never experienced something like that before. On our 20-minute drive home, we decided to examine our evidence. First up was the audio recording. We listened back to it and my friend stopped it shortly after it started. "What? Why is it like that? That's so weird." The audio recording started as normal. We leave the car and then we're heading back to the car. The part of the recording where we walked up to the castle and we were standing outside was entirely missing. We've never had any issues with our phone before. In fact, we used that exact phone to catch the voices of multiple ghosts in the past. Then we move on to the phone video. You can see lots of misty drizzle moving past the camera, and sometimes you can see my friend's breath. It was surprisingly cold for being 60 degrees out the whole day. But when we're up to the castle, the video gets a little spooky. We paused the video on the flashes he saw earlier and saw single frames of shapes running past. These things were differently shaped and colored than the misty water droplets. These were the most terrifying things we got from this trip, in my opinion. We got one picture that was kind of clear, and whatever it was, wasn't really too human-shaped. Also, we could very faintly see shapes of people or reflections of eyes inside the windows. Then, on the way back from the castle, we didn't see anything in the video. Then recently, I examined my video on my computer. Now, typically, people save the best for last, but my video wasn't the best. I saw very little within it, and it was very dark. But on our way up, we could see a couple of orbs, and on our way back, we could see small points that looked like sets of eyes, peering and blinking. Looking back on the experience, we all kind of filled with dread. My friend is very spiritually active and knowledgeable, and feels that we could have been in some serious danger. She said she's definitely adding this to her list where she's felt unsafe from the presence of some entity.
I'm from Central Europe. In my town, there is an old abandoned castle from the 1750s. After the Austro-Hungarian Empire, it was a hotel up until the 1950s. It has been abandoned ever since. It's not much of a tourist attraction as far as I know, but people do visit occasionally. For example, someone's relative or friend comes to visit them, so they take a walk to the park and, "Oh, that castle is cool, let's go see it." As kids, we experienced weird stuff there, mostly in the basement. The interior of the castle is nothing special. There is always sunlight inside. Nothing scary about that, but there are two main basements, a couple of hidden ones that the older generation of kids found. It's nothing special, just 2 or 3 small rooms that looks like a place where you'd hide fancy booze back in the day. And then there's a tunnel that leads to another village. It was built strictly as an escape tunnel that is all blocked up by dirt and who knows what. So the history of the castle says that a group of soldiers were escaping, and others just threw a ton of stuff and blocked them in. They blocked the way for about 5 meters deep, from both sides. That is still a long-ass tunnel, about 2 kilometers, 1.243 miles. Nobody knew much about it before an army went to explore the tunnel around the 1960s. As my dad says, they found nothing and didn't go deeper than 150 meters. They got claustrophobic because the tunnel would start at 2 meters wide, and after about 70 to 80 meters in, the tunnel was half the size and the air was tight. Another reason for not going deeper was they kept stumbling upon groups of bricks that fell off the wall. They blocked it up again. During the late 90s, 2 homeless people died there. One in the basement, and the other one was drunk and probably fell down the stairs inside the castle. Anyway, it's the scariest stuff to go down there alone on a sunny day, let alone at night. I tried it once and never again, even though you can see sunlight for about 10 steps in. I remember we used to explore down there before football practice. We just wandered around the castle, and after we got bored with it, we went down in the basement. Obviously, you need a flashlight or some kind of light, and if that dies, well, you can easily get lost in there and get paranoid very quick and probably die of a panic attack. Older guys from my town messed around there too. They even broke the wall in the tunnel. Went there themselves, but not deeper than 10 to 20 steps because you start feeling that air pressure and it stinks like 3 possums crawled in there and died. It was opened like that for a couple of days back in the mid-2000s. Every single person that went inside said it was creepy, and you always felt like someone or something was all around you. So me and a couple of buds went inside there. I can't describe that odd feeling of looking straight into the depths of the tunnel, knowing it's 2 kilometers long. The longer you look, the more paranoid and nauseous you get. It's such a suffocating and anxious feeling. And also because of the smell, you can't be in there for longer than a minute. You simply need to get out in the fresh air and come back in again. One kid thought it was a good idea to run into the tunnel to see what was beyond those 20 steps. I was there, as were many others. It was popular for us teens and preteens to mess around in that tunnel, knowing that it will be cemented back in a matter of days. So we saw the idiot run inside. We obviously see the light moving as he moves, but we can't see him. After probably 3 seconds of running, he was about 15 meters deep into the tunnel. The weird thing was seeing the light turn to us and then the other way. He was doing that for a couple of seconds. It seemed like he was disorientated, even though there are only 2 options to go. He started yelling that he's lost, but we barely heard him. Then quickly he started screaming, and one of the older guys went in a little to light the way. That helped him, and he started walking towards us, and then he just collapsed. He probably passed out from the smell and the air pressure. We got him out. He was so pale, and the weird thing was that he had this sort of stain on his shirt, a muddy stain. It looked like someone hit him over the back with a large muddy log, but it was summer. Everything inside was dry. Maybe the tunnel was damp somewhere, but it sure didn't look like that. We called an ambulance, but he woke up after a minute or 2 of saying how badly it stinks, and he felt like someone was whispering to him. That's why he was turning around for some time. He said he heard us talking to him, but this whisper was something else entirely. It creeps me the hell out, still to this day. Was that his paranoia acting up? Was he imagining that due to brain and air pressure? The tunnel was blocked the day after the incident by the city workers. I don't remember anyone entering that basement and tunnel anytime soon. Years later, we used to get drunk in the castle. We still visited the basement from time to time. What is still weird to this day is how about 5 minutes in there, you can feel this sort of air creeping around your neck, but you can't feel wind blowing inside. It feels like when someone is slowly exhaling behind you. I know it sounds like my buddies were messing around, but then I would totally hear and feel the person being behind me doing that. Besides, other people felt that eerie feeling around their necks too. We got convinced by other people that it's just the wind and hand or body movements that cause that, and simply because of that basement. It's cold and it's dark, and it's only normal to get a little paranoid in a space like that. Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. As always, a big thank you to all of the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below, so feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.